everybody. How are we all doing?
Doing well.
Everybody have their topics for today?
We do.
What's this, number 5?
This is number 5.
Number
Yeah,
5.
number
It's
5.
awesome. So I guess I'll start right off. Has anybody heard any of the McCartney concerts or any snippets?
Saw the snippet that you sent, which I loved.
Yeah.
I've got a
Oh,
picture
that's
of
right.
John.
Yes,
That's
yes,
fantastic.
yes.
And I saw the Something tribute to George. Other than
Yeah.
that, I'm going to see him a week from Saturday, so I'm going to try to stay out of it a bit and be surprised. So,
Yeah, it's hard to stay away from it. And
Yep.
in a way, as Beatles fans, of course, we can't resist looking at and listening to it. But on the other hand, it may spoil the actual experience when we go there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, and I didn't even think of that. Yeah. Well, I had just assumed everybody's like me. Like I remember, I think it was 2002. I remember Paul's first show was Oakland. And I literally remember that's when I first got into the internet really. And I could remember searching that I wanted to know the set list. And I think there was actually the night he may have fallen off the stage the first night or something. It might have been that tour, but the big thing for me was finding out what the set list was.
It's really quite amazing when you think about it, how easily accessible all the shows are just from people being able to capture them and show them.
Yeah.
I remember just if we're playing the game of searching out live shows with whether it be early Beatles shows, McCartney live shows, or for me when I was younger, Zeppelin and Pink Floyd shows, used to have to hunt out little cassette tape recordings, bootlegs of the live shows, recordings from the from the board maybe that were released from the show, but now you get to kind of experience it in the audience. I too watched it. It's awesome. It's great to see Paul out there. And it's a little foreshadowing for what my topic is later, talking about live performances. But I think beyond all the Beatles, I always got the feel that Paul enjoys the live thing more than anybody else. And to see him perform and be in his element with joy, that's Paul McCartney for me. And his best. Yes, he was amazing in the studio, and I'm not saying whatever, but seeing him live on stage in front of people and seeing the joy he gets from that directly is something that you feel it. It's honest. It's very very visceral, and it's great to see him out there doing it and in a position to keep rocking out. He sounds great. I think he sounds better now after the 2-year hiatus than he sounded right before in the tours right before, where his voice sounded a little bit more weathered to me. It sounds stronger right now in some of the stuff he's singing. But yeah, I've definitely enjoyed watching a lot of the bootlegs. I've spoiled myself to the whole show. I've watched a couple of the shows of it. It's great. It's very great.
Are there any songs that you want to hear that might not be the typical McCartney concert songs?
He plays most of the songs you would want to hear. It's one of those kind of tours. It reminds me a lot in that way of, again, when I saw Pink Floyd on the Division Bell tour or Delicate Sounds of Thunder, when they perform the songs you want to hear. I think the Lennon tribute duet was sort of the thing that I wasn't spoiled for ahead of time, and then it was great to see that, and I think that to me is the highlight of the show, because I think technology now is caught up with the ability to make something like that work, where sometimes the audio of it, when I've heard things like that been tried before, it doesn't work. That really felt like John was in the room too, and I loved it. I love how he's embracing that kind of stuff. A lot of Beatle love in this tour, and I like that. More Beatle love than some early McCartney type stuff. He was sticking to songs that people would want to hear.
I always, with any concert, no matter who it is, I like to see them go deeper and not do the obvious top 10. Just because, especially in Paul's case, I've seen more Paul McCartney concerts than any other concert. And what I do enjoy is on these little giveaways that YouTube is doing. I don't know how they get away with it, actually. I think Paul's people are going to have to make them take them down sooner or later. But I think the little snippets of history about each song is really awesome
Yeah.
that they put in there. I really like that a lot.
And to your point, Len, it's weird that some artists do put the hammer down on that. Prince was notorious for that in his lifespan, that he would have his army out there taking down videos because it needs to be directly flagged by an individual. So Paul would have to have some of his PR people out there flagging each show. Some artists are very, very much on that, and you won't see as many of their live performances. But some are lax. I agree with you though. People are giving it away, especially with VR. People are watching it on YouTube in VR and feeling like they're in the concert setup, which I have mixed feelings about that, but I definitely see what you're saying, Len.
What especially kind of irks me is the ones where you can hear the audience more than you can hear Paul. It's like, get the thing down. Who needs that? You know?
And that actually is very. I don't know if we want to transition into my first topic, but that's a perfect transition. I mean, we've talked about a lot of Beatles topics here. We've picked out some interesting different ones, and I want to bring something up that's been talked about over and over again, but we have to mention it at some point in this, and that's why the Beatles stopped touring live, why they stopped performing, why it was that the time that they stopped. So I don't know. And maybe would they have eventually post the Get Back stuff, would they have gone on another tour with technological changes? I mean, from my standpoint, obviously the screaming, the sound, not being able to hear yourself, the fact that one of the things that makes Ringo one of the greatest drummers of all time, playing all those shows without being able to hear anything as a drummer, that is unbelievable to me, that he was able to keep, because when you listen back to all those recordings, when they've altered with the sound and some sound takeaway to get the screams out, and you know that they can't hear each other, the fact that they were singing in key and the fact that Ringo is tight is some of the most amazing stuff, even if not all the guitar chords are all, they can be a little sloppy sometimes. And obviously John can be a little sloppy on stage sometimes for humor's sake, especially in those last couple of, performances on the keyboards, having fun and doing his thing. But it's an interesting question to me, and I'd love to get everyone's take on the reasons. And I mean, there's several other reasons: the sound, the people not listening to the music they were writing on the albums, Help, Rubber Soul, in that time period, Revolver, were more complex and harder to perform live without being able to hear each other. But yeah, I'm just curious of some of your takes on the whole Beatles stop playing live thing.
One of the things that made them stop was the sheer tension of those tours, and it increased the more in demand that they were. As great as it was for them to be number one and have the top 5 hits on the Billboard charts, there was more of a demand to see them than any other band. And they were constantly traveling. They never got to see the places really that they stopped at. They were just performing. They felt like, and I've read articles, they felt like performing animals after a while. And one quote that I remember is George saying, "So much bad food." And, they would stop at any old restaurant, and, not every place is a 5-star place. And when you're in a hurry, you're eating a lot of fast food. And you can see it in John, in his quote, Fat Elvis period, that he was, eating a lot of fast food on those tours. And that's all they did. That fast food, performing in every city, sometimes more than once, not being able to hear themselves. Fellini's Satyricon, if you know that reference, okay? Many women, and throwing themselves at them, and they're only human, and they only have so much energy, and just so much. It's like squeezing 50 years of touring into 2 years. So I'm surprised they didn't quit before that.
Yeah.
All that.
If you think about it, between 62 and 66, and even before 62, playing every night, they were either playing live, recording, doing a TV show, or doing a radio show, or traveling someplace, or making movies. And I think it was time for a break. I think they had enough of it. And go back to a George quote. he said that they, being the fans, gave us their money and their screens, but the Beatles kind of gave up their nervous systems, which was a far more precious gift to give.
Yep.
And I think they were just tired. Right after the done tour and John made the movie, George went to India for the first time. And I think that was, I don't think they were going back after that. I think that how we won the war, and then, George spent that time in India, and then all of them went. So it's, I think all of them had enough of it. I think they were trapped within their own fame.
Well,
And they were barely 25 years old, right? At this time.
Younger.
Right. So, you're right. Yeah. Famous for, 3-4 years, right? Really like worldwide famous. And they didn't really get to enjoy it at all. So I think that was a big part of it. Not so much. Yeah. I think, not hearing and the screams and all that, but I would think the biggest thing is just like, guys, we're famous. We want to enjoy, and yeah, a break. And then I think Brian Epstein dying, that probably just, took away the chances of them ever touring again. But I do think, later years, if they had stayed together and did their solo projects and come back together, I mean, we can only wonder what if, but
yeah, we can play that what if game if they would have gone on a little tour, done a live show. I just want to go through a little bit of the time period. The tour was the last tour that they did was the U.S. tour in 1966, and the other thing I just didn't realize was during that time too was the escalation of the whole "We're bigger than Jesus"
the Bible Belt,
yeah, with everyone protesting them and doing all that. I do think it's kind of cool to look at what the set list was during there. We got rock and roll music starting the show. She's a Woman. If I Needed Someone. Oh, Day Tripper, Baby in Black, I Feel Fine, Yesterday, I Want to Be Your Man, Nowhere Man, Paperback Writer, and Long Tall Sally was the around a 30-minute set that you could see the Beatles, and they played around here in Boston for Boston people at Suffolk Downs on August 18th, 1966. They played a bunch of other places. The last show I think was the 29th of August in San Francisco at Candlestick Park. So I agree that I think they would have, if they had stuck together. And we play the what if game here a lot, but it's part of it with the magic of the Beatles is thinking about those what if scenarios as well, because of how close of people they were, even through their fighting and when they came back together as friends. I think we would have seen the equivalent of and I said this before too, the 1968 Elvis comeback special live show of some kind, building off the rooftop if some of the financial matters with the management issues didn't happen. That's in my headcanon of what maybe would have happened, but I agree with what all of you guys are saying. That there's a lot of reasons why they stopped touring, and they needed to for their music as well to develop from that point.
Well, that actually introduces the topic I was going to discuss with you all tonight. I wanted to discuss, would they have gotten back together if Lennon wasn't killed? We touched upon it, but we've never actually been definitive regarding what our thoughts are. Would they eventually have reunited? And would it have been a one-time show, or would it have been they're back together again for a number of years?
I do remember a John Lennon interview. I'm going to guess it was probably near the end of his life. I don't even know when, but where he mentioned what they call, I think at the time they were calling it the Long and Winding Road documentary. And he mentioned that there were a bunch of existing films and whatever, and that was I don't even know if he called it a project, but it was a thing. It existed. So I have to think, I mean, my opinion is, I mean, the Eagles got back together. Even Pink Floyd, they played, was it one of the Live 8 or it was Live 8?
It was Live 8 before Rich Wright died. The four of them.
Yeah. I mean, I have to think they would have, but they're also very protective of their legacy, and so yeah, it could have been a one-time thing, or it could have been the anthology with John.
That's how I'd always felt. Oh, I'm sorry, Len.
No, it's okay.
That's how I had always felt about it. I felt it was going to be in the anthology time period. I felt either that or Live Aid, the first one where everyone else was getting back together. But I wouldn't have wanted to see that because, again, as a Led Zeppelin fan, like Zeppelin was sloppy there. The Plant and Page tour was much better. But when they got together for that show, I wouldn't have wanted to see just a shoddy put together. The Live Aid performance by Pink Floyd is a great example. I just want to leave it with this. I'm going to play a quick audio clip of John Lennon when he was asked the question around that time, what he said. And this is what he said.
Up again. It's quite possible, yes. I don't know why the hell we'd do it, but it's possible. Would you like that to happen? If it happens, I'll enjoy it. Would you want to initiate that happening? I don't know, Ellie, because you know me. I go on instinct. And if the idea hit me tomorrow, I might call him and say, come on, let's do something. And so I couldn't really tell you. If it happens, it'll happen. Yeah. So it is not.
So he continues a little bit like that, but to me, that says yes, it absolutely would have happened. I don't know.
That's a very good clip. I never heard that particular one.
I'll send you the link so you can watch the whole thing. There's only about 10 more seconds to it.
In 1980, before what happened to John, there were a lot of rumors going around that they had a session planned, at least John and Ringo, and they had a tendency to get together and help Ringo out, at least be on the same album as they did with the Ringo album, even not necessarily on the same song. But it's hard to, as you said, Dave, they were very protective of their legacy and justifiably so. They never wanted their stuff to be commercialized, like when Michael Jackson bought all the songs and released Revolution as a sneaker commercial. I think that all went out the window after John passed away. And that's why you may not agree with me. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. They weren't so protective when John went, and that's why they did the anthology with those 3 songs, or those 2 songs. And I think I think those were a mistake. I really do, because all 4 Beatles really should have been able to, and of course John couldn't because he was gone. You need all 4 of them to agree for it to be real Beatles stuff. That's my take on it. And but if John had lived, it's really hard to say. As John said elsewhere, maybe in that same interview, I don't know, Phil, but when they wanted to do something, it would probably be in the studio. Yeah. If it interested John, but they all wanted to do something at different times. They never wanted to do it all at the same time. Always one of them would say no. And if one of them said no, it would be out the window.
Len, the one you're thinking about is a different one. I think it's the latest one where he's sitting in a studio and the interviewer asks him something along. And he says, everyone wants the live show. If we were going to do it, we do it right in the studio. And I love the anthology from the standpoint of listening to the history of the Beatles, to go to what you were saying earlier about the McCartney live show. I enjoy that. It's one of the things I love about going to a Weird Al show. He gives you like a little history of every song before the song. You get to understand all of that. And I feel like listening to the anthology, listening to all the early recordings, the progression of it was all extremely entertaining to me. I didn't love Free as a Bird, and I like the version of Free Love better when Lennon's doing it with the acoustic guitar that's on the Imagine documentary that I talk about all the time. Like, it's just a more raw, beautiful version of it. I would have just rather see the 3 of them come together and write a song, the 3 of them working with as a unique thing, that's something maybe of a tribute to John, if they were going to do a new song or perform some of the Paul songs live or something. But it's because I don't think the technology was quite there, and especially John's voice in Free as a Bird, I don't think that's to the quality he would want released, and I'm surprised Yoko signed off on it. But I'm not saying it's bad, but it's not that Beatles quality. Real Love's a good song, but it's a John Lennon solo song that was put on. But overall, I think I agree with that, and I think John's right. If they did it, they would have come back together for another Abbey Road, and then maybe done a show on that. And I'm just mean like another final great album where they all come together to put their best into it and make that a great project.
You're not going to top Abbey Road, though. That's the thing.
It's the best for me. I don't know about and we haven't actually said this. Maybe we talked about it on an early show, but that's by far not by far, but that's my favorite Beatles album because I feel like it's the culmination. Obviously, the obvious statement for 100, Johnny. It's the culmination of all their work together into one thing, and you can feel passion in every spot in the George songs and the Ringo songs, in both sides catering to each of the main creative forces. So yeah, I also really love Abbey Road.
Thinking about the whole anthology, I mean, can you think of a better, and I'm probably the biggest Paul McCartney fan alive, I would classify myself, but is there a better person that markets things, right? Like that's him. I feel like that, it's one thing for us fans in an anthology project, right? The whole thing, but also a new Beatles song. How many, fair weather fans that did that bring in to watch, And I know he was handed the tapes at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction for John Lennon, I think, by Yoko. At least that's the story. But I think a portion of that was marketing and the other guys just kind of went along with it. 100%.
And I also think you just brought up an excellent point about the anthology and about what those songs did. And it was this, not even the second, but the second time period, huge tentpole that brought a lot of attention to my generation in the 90s to the Beatles, that we were all, more into 70s rock, late 70s rock at that time. And it made us more aware. Not that I wasn't, I mean, I'm a little different because of my family upbringing and my cousins and my uncle who educated me, who played for me the Beatles early and stuff. But for a lot of my friend group, that was the introduction to what the Beatles were, and that coincided with a great success in their sales as well during that time period. And that's one of the peaks. There's a wonderful GIF out there somewhere that shows, and I mentioned this before, that shows the all-time record sales from all artists, and it shows the ups and downs through history. And the Beatles one's just fun. It's like up, flat line for a while, like during the early 70s, and then the 90s, it's like right up there again. And
thing goes to number one immediately. I mean, it's amazing. It really is.
That's around when like Circus Soleil came out and all that stuff too, and that I believe a little later than that maybe. But the one album came out in the early 2000s. That was another big success, even though it's sort of redundant. Like I was like, the Red and Blue albums exist. We don't need this, but whatever.
If I could add one more thing to that, for me, I was born in '64, and I started listening to Beatles in '74, '73, '74. The anticipation of hearing a new Beatles song I enjoyed that. What I also enjoyed, not so much the song. I mean, the songs are okay, but I liked seeing the video that went with Free as the Bird and seeing them all working together again, and seeing George and Paul sitting on the bench and some of the laughter that went on. And I enjoyed that because I didn't get to see them as adults work together. You see Ringo with occasionally and working with others, but you never really saw Paul and George together again in any setting. And I think that was the first time I saw the two of them after the Beatles split up. Other than Ringo's wedding photograph, I must say, that famous photograph with all three of them. So I enjoyed that aspect of it. I was grateful to be able to see it at least once in my life.
So just to jump on this, as we finish the Beatles and them getting back together, into your question, Seth, do you guys think John would have taken part in the anthology project if they had came back to him? There's no question, right? Mm-hmm. And it would have been an interesting, again, it would have been an obvious, again, to play the what if game here with the getting back together thing. I think it would have been interesting to see them in a room with John talking too. And again, to go never seen, you don't really see Paul and George together. But then when you see them together, you see that wonderful brotherly, older brother, younger brother dynamic that I wasn't aware of from seeing other things. And I just wonder, if you see John in the room with Paul, is Paul not as big of a storyteller? Does he cater to John? Are they all trying to make John happy in that situation? It fills me with all these like wonderful images. Like I wonder, you see it. I know a lot more about what that's like with Get Back, but that was an interesting, weird period of time where there was mild power struggle kind of stuff, and John had gone to the back. If they're on even playing field, I would love to have seen what it's like with all of them in the room, where they're all excited to be in the room with John, and seeing that kind of vibe is how I would imagine it. They would all be sort of turning to John for most of the answers, and he would be the lead talker. I don't know.
I've said this before. I like the anthology. I wouldn't have missed it, but the pained look that George has every time you see him next to Paul is just, it kills me. It kind of kills the vibe for me, you know.
It's like every time you were talking, Len, I had this look on my face, like, like that's
He
the
didn't
kind of,
want to be there. He
No.
only did it so because he was broke because of Madonna, and the movie Shanghai Surprise that he produced because he was the owner of Handmade Films. Madonna broke the bank of George's production company.
I didn't
So
know.
he had to make easy money. That's why he did the anthology. Our next topic is the elephant in the room. Paul McCartney's tour. Was it a good idea? Is it a good idea for him to undertake a major tour at almost 80 years of age? And especially with all the criticism from commentators on YouTube, people commenting on the little snippets that we've seen so far, saying that he should retire, and a lot of other naysayers. And I'll save my opinion for last. What do you guys think? Should he retire? Should he have retired? Is it a good idea for him to do what he's doing now? Go.
I'll do it with a one word. No, he's Paul freaking McCartney. I'm going to use Paul McCartney's words with the White Album. It's the gosh dang Beatles White Album. Shut up. Are you Paul McCartney? Can you sing as good as he can right now? Can you play the bass? Can you play the keyboards? Can you entertain a crowd? Can you get all those people to sell to pay hundreds of dollars for tickets that I'm wishing I could afford to go see? Give me a gosh dang break. If people are going to roll the Stones out there every year to do their thing and no one's complaining about that, I'm sorry. I'm not using this as Stones hate. But I'll go there if I want to. But seriously, give me a break. I'm gonna go to these commentators' house and slap. I mean, I understand the health aspect of it. That's the only aspect I understand. But to me, someone like Paul McCartney has the ability to, and the healthiness, and has lived the clean lifestyle. And he could have a doctor on tour that's giving him glucose every evening if he needs it. He can afford that. And I think he can live in a gosh dang bubble if he wants to. And he can afford that too, 10 times 1,000 on this tour. If Paul McCartney, after we've been through what we've been through in the sense of not being able to, go out and do what you love doing, and he wants to do one more tour or two more tours or 17,000 more tours, you let the man do the gosh dang tour. Sorry.
Hey,
Well
everything that you say, Phil, I'm going to add a little bit to it. I've been a Beatles fanatic my whole life. My daughter grew up having to listen to me and has loved the Beatles like her father. And again, a week from Saturday, I'm going to actually be able to see Paul McCartney with my daughter. And we're flying. Funny thing is, I have to fly from Orlando to Boston and to get a connected flight to get down to North Carolina. Wow. For me to be able to go to a show with my daughter, see Paul McCartney, I'm absolutely thrilled. I never thought I'd be able to do that, because we could see a Beatle together. So I'm glad he's touring.
Dave?
This was sort of going to be my topic as well. So I've really been thinking about this, and it's funny. I was watching some YouTube the other day, and my 17-year-old daughter, Madison, she said, wow, Dad, he's in really good shape to be able to do that at his age. Now she's 17 years old. We talk about today's music versus, the Beatles, and she would agree, but she likes to give me a hard time. But yeah, I mean, he's in great shape. And, Phil, you mentioned earlier how he sounded a couple of years ago. I can remember hearing Maybe I'm Amazed. Was it 2019? And I remember hearing that and saying, oh my, what's going, that's really, is it age? Is it too much? But it's Paul McCartney, and he offers so much more than just his voice at nearly 80 years old. And he's still going to sell out. People still want to see him. But I do wonder, I'm a big sports radio guy, and, you listen to these interviews of, you have your Homer reporters, right? That they're not going to ask the tough questions, right? They're going to, I wonder, would anybody have the guts to bring it up to him? I don't think, and would that be considered wrong or disrespectful? In a press conference setting or in a, is it going to happen? And how is he going to react to that?
He'd say bugger off. He'd probably laugh, say bugger off, or punch the guy or something. He's like, he's from Liverpool. And I think you pointed out something. He has the energy. To me, it's not even about the sound quality. He feels like he should be on stage. I went to go see Bill Haley and the Comets after Bill Haley passed away. It was just the Comets. The bass player for the Comets, who must have been in his 80s, playing an upright bass, climbed to the top of a speaker system, playing an upright bass behind his back. And or someone's going to say he shouldn't play because whatever. I mean, does he sounds good. He can still do it. And live performance, you guys have all probably in some way performed live. Singers never for everyone that's James Brown or Prince or someone that could. Paul McCartney's always been that way. He's 80. He still sounds great in the studio recordings. And when he's live, he's singing on a tour. His voice sounds a little hoarse sometimes. And you're not going to hear every great performance. So I don't know. I think it's we also live in this age with the goodness of this YouTube stuff. You're also, it's like watching stand-up comedy when you're not in the room sometimes. Are you in the stadium hearing it? It feels different than when you're listening to a post recording of it. Len mentioned this earlier, where you're not listening to proper audio. You're listening to someone's phone in the back of a stadium with a bunch of people screaming around. How can you really assess where someone's abilities are? I'm sorry, I'm ranting about this because I love Paul McCartney, and I to your point, Dave, people can say that to him. His wife could, but other people could, his family, his kids probably could, but who's really going to try to say that to him,
One more point before we go on to the next. I'm sort of hypocritical though, because I'm a, Van Halen fan, as well as many other bands, but I saw them with Sammy Hagar several times, and I had always wanted to see them with David Lee Roth and never thought it was going to happen. Right. And then was it I think it was the Jimmy Kimmel show. I'm going to say, I don't know, 2015-ish, somewhere in there. And I heard David Lee Roth sing Panama. And I mean, they played a half an hour from my home and I didn't go. It was that bad.
Diamond Dave's tough live.
Yeah. I mean, but you know what? Van Halen's not Paul McCartney, or, it's not apples and apples. So that's all.
All right. I'm going to weigh in. Really good points, guys. First of all, you have Paul has or had the greatest, most diverse, natural voice, in my opinion, of all time. There was a bootleg on YouTube that was taken down of Paul McCartney's various types of voices, falsetto, alto. I don't know the names. I'm not a trained musician, but he could sing with a deep voice. He could sing in that gentle high voice. He could sing in the Little Richard imitation voice. And there were all kinds of other voices on this particular recording. You would never even know it was him. I think he could have been a great mimic or an impersonator in another life, in another career, So for him to go from that to the way he is now, it must be very painful to not be able to do what he has done in the past. So, and Dave, I love that question. I love what that comment you made about nobody has asked him what the decline in his voice is like. And I think it's an essential question, even though manner-wise, it's not a wise thing to ask. I want to know, I would love to ask him myself, the way you write songs, has it changed with the changes in your voice? Do you not do, would you have written Helter Skelter today, for instance? Would you have written Blackbird today with that delicate, he lost a lot of that little delicate stuff that made him able to go really higher than most males can go, and, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the song, Don't Let It Bring Me Down that he sings. The first verse is deep for Paul McCartney, and he it's just amazing. It's so riveting, that part. And then when he switches on a dime to that upper, not quite falsetto voice like another person, it just blows you away, and it must be very painful. It must be a very painful subject for him. I'm sure he notices. There's nothing wrong with his mind, and there's nothing wrong with his perception. He does it because he loves it, and he loves the fans, and he loves that the fans love him. And who wouldn't? If you're human, you interact with people that way, I'm going to compare now Paul with Elton John. Now, I was a big Elton John fan, never as big as a Beatle fan or an individual solo Beatle fan. But when his voice actually dramatically changed because he had throat surgery due to polyps that he had in his throat from, I guess, drug use and stuff like that. It was kind of a self-inflicted thing. And all of a sudden his voice was a lower register. And not only that, he changed the style of his singing into like a country western kind of a twang. I don't want to hear his old songs like that. I cannot go see Elton. I haven't been able to go see Elton John since his voice became like that. And he embraced it. He loved it. He claims that he loves his deeper voice.
Yeah.
But my thing is, I think Paul McCartney is, and this is going to sound so hokey, he's beyond an Elton John. He's beyond any other singer. His legacy is beyond. He is living history. He is a legend. And just to be in the same room as a legend or the same stadium, that's worth the price of admission, even if you're not going to hear that legendary
Tone.
versatility in his voice.
And Len, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, and it is sad in the sense of like, just as any performer, when you can't do things you used to be able to do, but at least he can still sing. When you were saying that, the person that just popped into my mind, even though it's completely different genre and similar to what happened to Elton John, I believe, but maybe people can correct me with the specifics, was what happened to Julie Andrews. And someone that had such a beautiful tone to her voice, and that she, I believe, had throat surgery or had a polyp or something. I'm talking out of my butt a little bit on the facts of it, and then she just can't sing at all anymore. And someone that just loved singing, that so much of her singing is how children were introduced to singing. And again, I would say someone almost I'd say Paul and her voice isn't similar, except they both had the most purest voice in the world at the clarity that they had. And we're fortunate, and I think Paul would say, whether he really feels about it, and I'm just speaking for him, that he celebrates that at least he can still do it, that he can still produce something that sounds good enough. Because I agree, he's past just how he's an international treasure.
He's more he's more than a singer.
Exactly.
More than a performer.
He's an icon, and beyond that, in the truest sense, not in the way that it's said for every other person these days that can push social media clicks. Paul McCartney is one of the truest last icons left, like of the big guard. If you look at people like Frank Sinatra, Michael Jackson, Beatles, Elvis, whatever you think of these people as performers, to a sense of quality of their music, they are icons beyond the regular definition. So I go to my point, a lot of good points, but if I'm celebrating part of it, that Paul McCartney can still go out there and make music that sounds good, still better than a lot of those Beatles tribute bands that we'll talk about on a different show. But some of them anyways. I saw a John Lennon one where that guy, how's he getting away singing John Lennon music? I'm going to talk about you later, buddy. But so that's how I feel about it. But I agree with all, as usual, everyone's making excellent points about it on both sides of the coin. And it's not an easy question, but there's only one person that honestly has that answer, and that's Paul McCartney himself. And it's what he wants to do.
one more little point regarding the Julie Andrews and Elton John comparison. Julie Andrews, through no fault of her own, had to have surgery for health reasons. I forget exactly what it was, but with Elton John, it was years and years of drug abuse that he did to himself. And it kind of angers me as a fan. You know, I mean, he did it to himself. It's bad for him, obviously. It's his life. But you know, when you're a performer and you have fans and you've cultivated those fans, you kind of owe it to them to at least try to keep a little bit healthy. Now, having said that, I'm going to say something else that I'm probably going to disagree with myself when I watch it back. Is Paul did his share of a little bit of abuse too. That marijuana, I don't think that did him any good. I really don't. He was a real heavy marijuana smoker up until his arrest and when he went to Japan that time.
And he smoked cigarettes. You see a lot of those early studio shots. He was smoking butts in between takes of singing. And I mean, some part of you always looks at Paul McCartney as a musician, and you're like, oh my God, he's playing bass. Most of those vocals, he's playing his bass line at the same time he's singing the vocals, and he's smoking a cigarette, and he sounds like that. But there is something to that, and there are a lot of singers that have done things to their voice through health reasons that have. Whitney Houston is another person just popped into my mind when you were talking about Elton John and repeated drug use ruining one of the best instruments ever created. So that's a question, and it's an interesting question when you, especially as a singer, especially as maybe an actor as well, equal, or a newscaster or a radio host, your instrument and how much is it your responsibility to make sure you take care of your instrument when you want to keep creating the art? Someone like Paul, he's obviously it's age. It's not so much. I think it's part of that too, but he's also got so many miles on that voice. I think that's part of it with Paul too. And you hear that if it's that scream, like you were saying about writing Helter Skelter. I think that one of his voices probably did the most damage. That high scream that he's doing. It's a whole throat. There's no diaphragm going there as a subpar vocalist. As a vocalist, there's a difference. You sing from down here, you can get away with it. Some of those Paul voices are up here, and he's just screeching right through that stuff.
Oh, he took days to record "Oh Darling."
He killed his voice. He purposely killed his voice.
He would do that song. He couldn't do another song for the rest of the day when he rehearsed that.
So he put it on the line, and he's paying the price.
Yeah.
Just like we were talking earlier with the tour of what the tours took out of them. Paul's one of those old guard. He's gonna give till he can't give anymore, because that's what he knows. He's one of those old time entertainers, and he has that in him. He's gonna. You'd have to drag him off that stage with they couldn't get him off that stage. And I think the unfortunate thing is, someone like Paul McCartney at this stage in his career, from a playing standpoint, like you think of someone like Buddy Guy, who's, can play from sitting down and his voice still sounds pretty damn good because he can play these small clubs, doesn't have to scream out arenas. Paul McCartney, if he was just playing a tour around small clubs doing acoustic he could protect his voice a little bit, but he's going to stadiums, screaming in stadiums and stuff too. So a lot of that just puts weight on your voice at his age and with the miles.
Seth, I want to ask you something. Now, you're a teacher as well as I. For a few years there, when I was doing my other show, Wrestling Talk, I suffered the effects when I would do the show of having raised my voice constantly during my classes. And when I was aware of that and I softened my voice and I don't rely on that anymore, my voice is stronger now. Have you experienced any of that yourself?
Probably not yet. I'm still, although I'm the director of ed, I still teach a couple of classes. But the slight difference, Linda, I smoked for many, many years. I quit smoking 2 years ago.
Wow.
After smoking for 35 years. So any effects that I have in my voice, I think are attributed to the amount of cigarettes I smoked over the course of my lifetime. One thing I have noticed is that it's a much raspier voice now than maybe even 4 or 5 years ago. But I haven't had, I don't think I've had any effects yet. No one's pointed it out to me. Maybe I'll do a poll in my class tomorrow or Monday and see what everybody thinks. My voice changed. Perhaps it has, but no one said anything to me. I don't notice it, but I do notice there's a little bit of raspiness from the years of smoking.
So this hat is an actual hat from the Cavern that my friend Madusa, who was the Monster Truck champion and WWE ladies champion and Japan champion, she's a friend of mine, and she sent me this when she just returned from an autograph signing. She went on the Abbey Road tour, or it's the official souvenir guide here that she got me. See that?
Nice.
Went to all the places that I'm sure all of us would like to go. So I want to thank her. I'm going to try to get her to record an interview with me that I'll show during not this episode, maybe, but another episode where she describes some of her experiences on the tour. Now, she's a Kiss fan, not necessarily a Beatles fan. So I think she actually went there for me. So that was very nice of her to do. So
She is awesome. I'm actually was a fan of her in her wrestling days, and I get the Kiss thing. I'm not a big Kiss fan, but what I will say about Kiss is the marketing that they were able to put together, the characters. A lot of bands try that and don't pull it off. Kiss really understood creating character and developing character and marketing in a way that that impresses me, that would impress Brian Epstein. We'll say that. I think he would be able to appreciate how Kiss was able to create that whole army and that whole thing. One of my great friends is a huge she's a huge Kiss fan as well, and even though they're not necessarily on my top list, I respect them and the fans for the army and the universe that they were able to create. So thank you so much.
great. Well, I think we've come to the end, huh, guys?
Yep.
Anybody have any other last tidbits?
I was just going to say something stupid like we've come to the end of Abbey Road. That was bad. We've come to the end of Abbey Road. Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. I guess. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Does anybody else have McCartney tickets for to see him? I'm actually
do.
seen him twice. Once in
do.
Orlando as well.
I don't.
I don't as of yet. I can't.
I've been following the prices and most likely going to go to the first show at Fenway. Probably take my son and probably spend $150 a ticket, something like that, I think.
I would love to go, and I saw him once and it was amazing. I don't want to say it like this, like, because I love the visual, visceral aspects of being in Fenway Park watching a show. I just hate the sound there. Any band I've ever seen there does not sound great unless you're on the floor, and it costs so much to pay for tickets for the floor. I'm not saying I'm not going at the last minute, that I might not break down and go at the last minute. I went to go see the Who there randomly the last time, and I'm not even a big Who fan, just to be there because it was kind of cool. But it's always cool to be at Fenway. You're paying for the experience. It's interesting and awesome to see rock and roll shows there, but I always find the sound system there a little off to my ears when there's a weird echo in there and stuff like that. But yeah, that's my bitter 2 cents for that's my bitterness, being like, oh, can he play Foxborough? That would be a much better place. I'd much
What's great about Fenway though is I was on the I was going to say on the floor, but on the field.
The field sounds good. The field sounds
and
good.
Being able to not only see the entire park, right, but seeing the field just covered with people, that's pretty unique experience.
Yeah, it's worth it if you've never done it, obviously. And if it's your only opportunity to see someone like Paul McCartney, it's a great arena, and I'm glad they opened it up. I don't want to be sour grapes. I just been there a couple of times in the stands for like a Billy Joel show, and it just sounded like it was just like a mush sound through the whole thing. And yeah,
This will be my 4th or 5th time seeing Paul.
My 3rd and 4th. I have tickets for the following Saturday in Orlando.
Ooh, that's good.
My daughter couldn't make that show. She's going to be in Greece, and that's why we're going to North Carolina the week before. But since it's only 10 miles away, but it's a huge stadium. It's called Camping World Stadium. It's the football stadium with I don't know who plays there, but they'll be interested. I'm glad to see him.
That's a great opportunity, Seth, to compare the 2 shows.
Yeah, I'm very excited. Very excited. I'm not too excited about the plane trip, but I'm very excited about seeing McCartney and then the following week. It's gonna be a long day in the plane.
Yeah, and like you said, it's just awesome. You're going to be able to see Paul McCartney with your daughter. That's just awesome.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely.
So this is show number 5. This is a great show. And until next time, I'm Len.
I'm Phil.
I'm Dave.
I'm Seth,
And we are.
the
The
Beatlemaniacs.
Beatlemaniacs.
All right. Join us again next time on the Beatlemaniacs. And if you want to write to us and ask us questions, write to the Beatlemaniacs podcast at gmail.com. Thanks for joining us.